Tomorrow there's a real course actually on FHIR data modeling from my colleague Miriam. So I will not go very deep into the FHIR modeling itself, but maybe just to give a bit of context, this is what I call the 7 stages of FHIR data modeling, which is not necessarily something I invented, but just as a strategic outline. Generally, when you want to build a FHIR implementation guide, or when you want to solve something with FHIR, you think, oh, this could really benefit from better interoperability. You start with some kind of use case where you think, okay, if only we would better talk to each other, we would have better patient outcomes, better experience for doctors, etc. So you always start with the use case. That's the really important part. Without that and all the buy-in from the stakeholders, etc., you're not going to get anywhere. Then you define a logical model. That can either be in FHIR. FHIR has infrastructure for you to make logical models. So define all your data elements and resources and terminology separate from what FHIR's own opinions about resources. So you can really free-form define your logical models. But you can also do this in an Excel spreadsheet or anything like that. So just make sure you sit down with your stakeholders, get all the different players involved, all the different entities, the terminology that you want to use, the attributes that are important to everyone at every step. So that's the logical modeling step. And then, only then, you start building FHIR resources. Today, I'll be using a toy use case, so we're going to skip ahead and just go straight to the building of FHIR resources. And we'll probably do a bit of validation. But the rest of it is more decoration in my presentation today. But of course, it fits in a bigger framework. And then you validate that to make sure all your example data is correct, your profiles are actually valid FHIR, etc. You document that with an implementation guide. So these resources are really for machines to read and make sure that your data is valid. But then you want a human-readable narrative around that for consuming what the implementation guide is about and how you should implement it. So that's what we call an implementation guide, just a fancy website, PDF, documenting your data model. And then you want to make sure that everyone can reach that. So there's a public way to publish your FHIR data models in packages.phir.org. And then you collect feedback. You actually do that all steps of the way, of course. You work together with your stakeholders, but that just as a separate step. And then you keep going through that cycle, pushing out iterations of your data model. That just as the framework. And then we get into FHIR Shorthand. We're going to focus on that building step, and we're going to use FHIR Shorthand for that. FHIR Shorthand is its own little language. And technically, it's not even valid FHIR. The only real representations of FHIR are JSON and XML. Those are the only ones that are actually approved in the standard. But FHIR Shorthand is a shorter way to write in a text-based way those XML and JSON resource. So your FHIR Shorthand resources will always eventually be transformed to JSON, so they're actually usable FHIR in a FHIR implementation guide. It was started by MITRE, a US institution. Currently it's maintained by people within HL7, look in the community. It's an open source project. And it's a way more text-based way of editing your FHIR resources rather than the graphical editors like Forge. We have one, for example, but there's also a lot of questionnaire editors and these kind of things out there. But this is really text-based, which makes it really useful if you use it in Git. So it's really useful Git diffs. And it's nice and easy to write, find and replace, all those kind of things. So all the things you're used to from a more text-based way of editing. This is where the official specification of FHIR Shorthand lives. It's its own little implementation guide that defines how the standard works. And I'll show some more useful resources at the end, but there's also a website called Fish School, and there's a lot of useful stuff in there that I'm also gonna blatantly steal during my presentation. Good, so let's see some actual FHIR Shorthand. This is a screenshot. Is it readable in the back at all, Taylor? No, not at all? Okay, good. Here. Wait, that seems to work. Okay, so this is the US core patient in JSON. So you have a bunch of, it tells you which resource type it is, and then there's a bunch of metadata like a description and a version, probably somewhere. And then here's the real content in the differential, and then there's a snapshot of the resource. And that starts with a few extensions here, like the race extension, and then other constraints. This is what it looks like in normal JSON FHIR, but on Fish School, you have this transformer online between the two of them, and this is the same representation, but then in FHIR Shorthand. So again, we have a bunch of metadata. So we define, it's a profile, so a structure definition. We call it a U-score patient, and it's based on the patient. So you see this little section here with basically metadata, and then here a bunch of extensions, and then under here somewhere is also actual constraints like name must support, these kind of things. And you see some other terms like alias here, and we'll come back to them later when we actually start writing them. But in general, it's just like, this is a profile structure definition. You have metadata, and you have the real content of the resource where we put constraints on the normal FHIR resources, on the base FHIR resources. Yeah, so keywords and metadata over there, and the keywords is the profile here, and then you have all the content of the resource. And the same is true, so now we're looking at a profile, but now let's look at an instance of that same US core patient. Yeah. So again, we define here in JSON, it's the resource type is patient, so instead of a structure definition that we just saw, and then you have the real content of the resource here. What is happening? Oh, it's back. And then in the fish, you have the same. So here we use the keyword instance. So we make an instance, which is an instance of patient. And then here's all the content of the resource. And here we do actual value assignments with the little equals sign. So now you've seen at least what FHIR Shorthand looks like. Yeah, keywords and metadata and content. So that's a theme that comes back. So let's first look at those keywords and metadata. We've seen profile just now, and profile is just another word for the most common structure definition. So US core patient is a profile that narrows down what the patient, the core FHIR patient, can do. And we've seen an instance, that was the instance of a patient here. And you see here on the metadata, these are the keywords, and then, I guess these are keywords, but these are the declarations, and then these are the keywords that you need to use for that. So when we use a profile, well, you probably should have an ID and a description and a title, but it's required to have a parent, like my US core patient is based on the core FHIR patient. And the same when you have an instance here, well, you should probably have a description and a title, but it's required to say, okay, this is an instance of patient or US core patient. So that's what's going on here. We have a lot of other declarations, but it's also a very limited set, basically. We are going to look today at profiles and instances, extensions, code systems, value sets, and then we'll use some aliases, we'll use some rule sets, and the rest we're going to ignore, I think. So these are the keywords. So that's that little top part there. And then the most simple things that happen under there for the content are constraining cardinalities. So for example, who has made a FHIR resource in their life? Can we see some hands here? That's a good amount. Nice. So you've probably done this. Like you say, okay, in the core FHIR spec, a patient can be anything, right? You can have 0 names, 100 names, whatever. But for our use case, really important to always have a name. Otherwise, like, we cannot make a pretty website. So we set the cardinality here from at least 1 to a maximum of unlimited. And for the birth date, we do the same, at least 1, and then we leave the maximum to whatever it was before, so in the core patient in this case. So that's the most simple assignments you can do. Again, this comes straight from the definition of FHIR Shorthand. So this is the simplest thing that we're going to do in a profile. And then the other thing that we saw, especially in the instance, but you can also do this in profiles, if you want to fix a value to a certain value, like you set the name for a patient, you do that with the equal sign. So everything under there in the content has the little star, like the kind of summary list. Here we set active to true, and we set a code to this thing here, which is just, this is the code system, but then a short version of we're using the system. This is the code actually behind the hashtag, and this is the little between quotes. There's a lot of these little things that you may need to get used to. There's also, if you go here on the FHIR or on the FHIR School, a nice PDF with a quick guide for all the rules in FHIR Shorthand. So I'll give the link at the end for that too. So there's just a little of these stuff we need to know, but probably here it's a good time to actually start coding. Who happens to know where this is? Keukenhof? Who said that? Yeah, are you Dutch? Okay, good, that helps. Good. Although I've never been there, I think more... Oh, nice. In the Bulb area? See, the Dutch people say you should go. But I hear it's closed actually already. I looked it up yesterday, which is because it's not tulip season anymore, I guess. I studied biology originally, but I have no clue. So this is the Keukenhof. There's a lot of tulips here. And that's what our use case is going to be. So this is a nice code system of different tulips. They have all kinds of different names, and they bloom in different times. Apparently now we're in the late spring. So I guess you could still make a pretty flower bed with these guys, the parrot. But this is what we're going to use for our use case. So so my demo company is always called Acme. So we're now Acme Tulip Care, and we're going to build some nice representation of tulips in the FHIR world. Very much a toy use case, of course, but we're going to take 4 steps. We're first going to make some profiles and instances, and then we'll do other stuff that we'll see. So this is the time that if you want to play along, feel free to open your laptop. Otherwise, feel free to look at me doing this. You can go, if you go to Simplifier, and you make your free account, you log into your account, you can go to, here's the little fish playground. And there you will see, basically you can type FHIR Shorthand on the left, and on the right you see the rendering of the FHIR Shorthand that you've typed. You can turn on the live translation here, and then anytime you stop typing, if I make this extensible instead, bloop, I stop typing, and now it's, we don't see it yet, but it's extensible binding now. So that's a really nice way. You see the JSON representation, XML, and if I type something completely wrong here, then it will also give me an error, so some live validation. You can do that if you're just playing around, but when you make a Simplifier account, you can also make one free project. And then you can actually store it in the project and do more with it, build an implementation guide around it. So that's what I'm going to do. I use my Acme organization here. I have a project set up for tulips. Yeah, here's Acme Tulip Care. There's not much in here yet, no FHIR resources yet, only stuff that I use to build my implementation guide. But when you go here to the file editor and to the new project editor that we've built, we can do the same thing that we just saw, writing FHIR Shorthand here in the middle and seeing a rendering on the right. So let's first start with making a new file. And we're going to call this, I'm probably going to do everything in one file. You don't need to do that. But I'm just going to make resources.fish here. And now we have a very simple fish file, an empty fish file, basically. And that's the only downside of fish. You start with a blank screen. So we need to know what to type. And luckily, if we know a bit of the basics, then we can help ourselves by just looking at the lookup.
I think your microphone cut out.
Oh, did I hit it? Hello. Hello. Hi.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. I'll try not to hit it again. This is, a very simple FHIR. So when we start typing, I have the live translation on here. I'm first going to make a profile, because I think we're just going to treat tulips as patients here. And so I'm first going to make a profile that specifies what, if you want a valid tulip instance, what it needs to have. So we'll start with a profile. We use the profile keyword. And since the live validation is on, it will automatically tell me that I'm doing stuff wrong. Well, first of all, we need to give profile a name. So this is going to be my, I guess, tulip, Acme tulip profile. I'm not sure what I called it last time, but Acme tulip. And now it tells me here, okay, you have Acme tulip, but we remember, of course, that for a profile, the parent was mandatory. It's a bit cryptic here, but you can probably get that out of there. So, okay, parent. As we said, we're going to treat the tulip as a patient, so we're going to build this on the core FHIR patient. And now we have our first very simple, valid FHIR resource. So we see here, I'll make it a bit bigger here. We see the rendering here. We have a profile, and then this is the JSON that's behind it, which is a very simple patient, and this is the XML representation. Now, the question is, of course, what can we actually do in here? What's part of the patient? So what I like to do is open my patient here in a new tab and just look at all the elements that are in patient. Okay, so patient can have a name, can have a gender. Well, probably gender is not very important. Actually, I looked it up yesterday, and tulips are bisexual. So let's say gender, in this case, is not relevant. We're going to strike that out. So a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 0 genders. So that's a very simple change that we've done. We don't see it here yet, but we'll see it when we actually save it or when we look at the JSON. That the gender now has a maximal of 0, because the minimum of 0 was already in the core patient. And maybe the same thing, well, a name, we probably want to have a name, but not just any name. Let's make sure we have just a given name. So name, if we go back to here, name is a human name object. So if we click through to human name, we see, okay, human name has a given and a family generally, and the given is 0 to star. So maybe in this case we want to say, you really need to give us a name. So I want to make that 1, and then maybe leave the rest as is. So now we made the name mandatory. And the same way we can make the given name mandatory. And here we have 2 options to write this in FHIR. We could say, okay, name dot given is mandatory. Or we can also use indentation. And you can choose whatever is easiest in this case. So I could write the same thing in this way. Means completely the same thing. It's just some situations the one is easier, and some situations the other one is easier. I guess that's a really simple patient. We can give some more metadata. So there are some keys that we saw already in the presentation that FHIR has basically elevated to these dedicated keywords. So we can give the patient a description and a title, but we cannot set the canonical directly, which is also part of the metadata. Normally you also don't have to, but in this case, I would like to set the canonical manually. So title, there's just a keyword for that. Title, so maybe it's Acme tulip. Oh, I guess we can have some spaces in here. Oh, I guess I need to quote it then. That's better. But as I said, we don't have one for canonical. Or URL, it's called in FHIR. But there's a little hacky way. So if there's not a dedicated keyword for it, you can always go with the little caret sign, go up into the metadata of a resource or an element, and then we can still set that URL ourselves. So the URL in this case, maybe I want to call this something. I generally use my fake acme.org. Tulip care, and then tulip. I use my own canonical here. So that's a way you can still go into the metadata of the resource itself. You need to know it's there. And this is also a nice way. So if you think it's a bit ugly here to write that complete long canonical here, sometimes they're very long, you can also use an alias here. And that's just, if you have a bit of programming experience, it's just like a variable. Although it's not just any variable, it can only be used for canonicals. So I can here say alias. I'm just going to define an alias here that says, okay, my tulip canonical is this one. And somehow I don't use quotes there. And then I can use this variable here in my profile instead. So, still pretty straightforward, right? So you see the canonical is actually what we set it to. Okay, so now we have a very simple patient profile. Let's also make a very simple tulip instance. So the instance, we've already seen it in the example. It starts with the instance keyword. And we're going to give it a name. So this is my tulip1. And again, it will warn me like, hey, you started an instance, but instance of is required when you build an instance. So it's going to be an instance of. And here, actually, in most of these cases in FHIR, you can use either the full canonical, so we could reuse that one, or you can refer to it by the name, which is generally shorter. So I'm just going to use the name of the resource that we defined there, and say, okay, my tulip here is a instance of Acme tulip. That worked, but I get another error. Patient.name has a minimum cardinality of 1, which we defined earlier. So this is where we can actually assign a value for name. And maybe, I think it's enough if we just set name.given is, I don't know, what's a good name for a tulip? Hank. Yeah, so now we have a little instance here. This tulip is called Hank. And we see that the tulip claims to be a valid Acme tulip here. So yeah, we have all the rendering here on the right and JSON. Then now it's probably a good time to actually make the JSON resources. So we have FHIR resources, FHIR resources are being transformed into JSON by Sushi. That's a little tool you can run on the command line. But we've also built that here in the editor. So when we run, and that's basically running behind the scenes here all the time. So now I can save this and store it back to my project. And now if I open up my project here in a new tab, we can see we have a few profiles here. And we have one instance of a patient here. And the profile, if we click on it, has all the changes that we've seen before. So in the differential, we see only the changes that we made. So the name is mandatory, the gender is stricken out. And that results in this full data model, the core patient with our constraints layered on top. Following along? Great. Okay, let's make it a bit more difficult. We had the basic constraints. Yeah. Now let's define a tulip variety. And tulip variety, of course, it's not something that's defined in the core FHIR spec. So what we do when we want to add something to a patient resource, we've seen how we can narrow it down, like we've stricken out the gender, but if we want to add something, we have extensions for that. And extensions will allow you to define another element on your patient that wasn't in the core spec. And in this case, we're going to define a tulip variety. Let's start with a very simple tulip variety here. So I'm going to define an extension. Extension. And the extension is going to be called tulip variety. Yeah. Easy as that. We have a very simple extension. Of course, it doesn't do anything yet. So in here, we could an extension. Let's look at what an extension is in the core FHIR spec. So a very basic extension like this. It has a URL defining the extension, and it has a value. But in the base extension, like this value can be anything. But of course, a tulip variety is not expressed as a number or a date or anything. So maybe if we want to do it very simple, we could say string and just say, okay, our tulip variety will be coded as a string here, which is generally not very good practice on standardizing your data, but sometimes that's a good place to start. So here we have value, and value is actually called value x here. We've seen that because it's a choice type element. And under there we have all different values. So we could say value x can only be a string. And now we've seen that from all that entire long list of values, we've stricken down what we refined the tulip variety is going to be a string. Next thing would be to actually use that extension within our profile. And for that, it's good to know that every resource in FHIR already has an extension element. That's a long list of all kinds of extensions. And it starts with 0 extensions in there, but we could add one here. So I'm going to define and say, and I hope I'm typing this right, extension x contains tulip variety. And that's, I think, in principle correct, but it needs more information because I need to say, okay, well, how do you want to call this extension within your profile? So it's going to be named exactly the same, tulip variety. And then the last thing it will complain about is that it needs a card, which is that cardinality thing that we've seen before. So let's make this tulip variety also mandatory. One too many. No, element path found. Extension X contains. Wait, that's not how I want to name it. Yeah. Okay, let me cheat and see what I'm doing wrong. Extension contains named. Is that what I'm doing wrong? Yeah, sorry, yeah, you're right. Yeah, we don't see it at the. Thank you. Very welcome. So that's now we added the extension to the profile, and of course it's still complaining about our little instance Hank here, because Hank doesn't have a tulip variety, but we can of course give Hank a tulip variety, which is extension. It's called tulip variety, or we call it tulip variety here. And then the value, I guess it's value string, is wait. Whew, that worked. Okay, good. What was the name of the tulip? I forgot what the. Thank you. Oh, yeah, no, but the variety, sorry. We're going to make it a parrot. Good. Parrot. Great, nice, late blooming. So we have a value for this extension. Nice, this is good, but let's be a bit more diligent on our coding for the tulip variety and don't make it a string. So I want to have a nice list of different tulip varieties. So I'm going to define a code system here. Just another one of those. Keywords, tulip variety, code system. I'm just going to give this a unique name. And the rendering is a bit weird here, but we've now defined the code system if we go all the way to the bottom here. The code system, and then the code system needs to have values. So in here, I'm going to define that it has, well, that parrot code. And this is, again, just a little syntax you need to know. But now we have a code parrot. We can give that a readable name, a human readable name, this way, and then we can give it the description, like late bloomer. And that's a really simple way to have a code. This is where you open up ChatGPT and say, just continue with believable tulip variety names in FHIR Shorthand. See if that works. Lovely. Thank you. That'll be enough. Good. We have a real code system now. Look at that. And then a code system is just a long list, but we need to define a value set as an intermediate. But I'm just going to make a very simple value set, which includes everything from this code system. So value set, I'm going to call this tulip variety VS to differentiate between them here. And I'm going to say include codes from system. I think it's something like this. Yeah, seems to work. So now we see the value set definition. Again, a bit weird rendering, but this is the value set stuff. Import all the codes from that code system. So this guy over here. And then the final thing you need to do, okay, we're no longer going to use strings here. I'm just going to remove Hank for a second again, because Hank still has a string. But instead of a string, I'm going to say this needs to be a codable concept. Codable concept. So now we changed the extension to use codable concept. So this is how you use a code in FHIR. And I'm going to say that and then let's have a look at codable concept quickly. I see I'm definitely running out of time. Let's look at codable concept in a new tab. We see codable concept. You can have either a text, in the case where you really don't have a code in this, for this, or you can have a coding. And the coding, again, contains a system and a code generally, and you can have other version display. So let's remember that when we go back here. So I need to say now that I want value x dot coding. Coding. Nee. Dot codable concept. Value codable concept. Yeah, dot coding. And that one needs to come from our value set. Was it this? No, probably not. From? Okay, back to the cheat. Where's the extension? Here. Oh. Wow. I leaned on something. Value x dot coding needs to come from there. Oh, okay. Was easier than we thought. Value x coding. Yeah. So now we have. Okay, we bound this value to this value set, and now let's try to repair Hank, because we still have him in. So now it's a string, but that's no longer allowed. It's a value dot codable concept dot coding, and under there we had a code and a system, right? So the code is going to be #parrot, because that's how you refer to a code. Yeah, that's going to be a lower C. Yeah. Woo. Patience, extension, value, coding. Code is parrot. And then, and actually we don't need to write this separately, so we can just say that the entire coding is from this system. This system. I want the code parrot. And now we have set both of them at the same time. Okay, a coding with a system and a code. Yeah, more complicated already, right? But okay, I got 10 minutes left. Less, probably. Good. I wonder whether I'm going to get to the most complex use cases, but we did 1 and 2 here. I think one thing that's very powerful, that's nice. I'm probably going to skip the slicing here because it's a little bit more complicated. But let's do the little fun thing. For example, we have now a lot of resources here. We have this profile, and we have the canonical resources, value set, extension, the code system, and we probably want to specify on all of them that they were made by Acme Corp. That's just good practice, and probably want to give them a version number 2. So I could just go here and say, okay, well, version is 0.0.1. It's a string, actually. Sorry, that's a metadata element, so I need to go up with the little caret. Yeah, so I could do that, and now it's set, and I could do the same thing here for, the extension is also 0.1. Do that for everything, and the same thing then for, my publisher also needs to be, publisher is Acme Corp. And that works, but I could, of course, duplicate a lot of code if I'm doing that, and it makes a lot of work to change that all later. So what I'm going to do here, and that's probably the final thing that we're going to do, is make a little rule set. And this is real magic that you cannot do in JSON or XML, but it's super useful to do it here. So I'm going to make a rule set, and I'm going to call that one include metadata. Metadata. I have a simple rule set here, but it needs some values. So in the metadata, I'm going to say these two things, publisher and version. That's going to be used within the rule set. Okay, I haven't used the rule set yet, but I can now say here, insert this specific rule set. And now, we don't see it here, but if we go into the profile, it's actually set to publisher Acme Corp, and the version is 0.0.1. And this is something that we can now easily replace here and there, and we can just maintain it in one single place and change it easily and have it down for all our resources. And this can be actually way more powerful, so you can also make some parameterized rule sets here. So say I can say my variable. This will give errors now because I'm using it everywhere without a parameter. And then I can say, okay, well, this needs to be actually my variable instead of just Acme Corp. So my variable. And this way you can actually make your code for writing FHIR resources way shorter and easier. I'm just going to remove it because I hate looking at error messages. Well, good. That's the final thing I wanted to show. This is what we did. Just to recap, we used aliases just to make canonicals shorter, and we can use that in there. We've used keywords, instance and profiles, and we went up into the metadata, and we constrained some values. We didn't do that one, but yeah. We fixed some values here. We made an extension, and we made the value set in the code system and used that within our instances. Rule sets, we use this little rule set here to make stuff way easier and more powerful. We didn't do slicing, and this gets complicated, but we're just going to skip that for now and look at it in the slides later. We have resources. Fish School is just fishschool.org. It has a few very useful things, including this downloadable quick reference. It has a full online course for building implementation guides, also more the background on understanding implementation guides. It has this fish online that I showed screenshots of, converting between the two. Also very useful to take a JSON resource in there and see what the fish looks like if you need to build it yourself. And it has all the documentation on how to install it on your machine too. And then on Simplifier, I mentioned we have this fish playground that you can use, but also you can use it in the new editor that I showed you. And that's about it. Of course, are there any questions? There is, as I mentioned, Miriam, my colleague, has real instructions to FHIR modeling, so more the background and what is slicing and all those kind of things tomorrow. There's these two other talks from other people on later today, this one, and this one is on Friday, on other stuff around FHIR Shorthand, more advanced stuff. And then, of course, if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear that in person or via this QR code. Please use it. If you haven't used it yet, maybe this is the time to test it. Okay. Thank you. That's all. Yeah.
Is there a tool to go back from JSON or XML to FHIR?
Yeah. You can try it online in that FHIR Online thing, but it's also a separate standalone command line tool called GoFish. And yeah, if you go around from GoFish to Sushi, it's a fishing trip. You know? There's a lot of fishing jokes. If you were used to all the FHIR jokes, you can get all the fish jokes now. Keep in mind, though, it's not a lossless conversion. Because take those rule sets, those aliases, the way you split it up over files, white space, etc. So it's not lossless, but it will actually try to do some best practices. So it will try to do some rule sets in there and aliases and stuff. Yeah.
And it will get you started if you already have.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to migrate to doing it in FHIR from now on, yeah, definitely. But for every project, choose whether you're going to do it in FHIR or JSON, or if need be, split up which resource in FHIR and which in JSON or XML, because it's not lossless. You don't want to one colleague do it in one way and the other colleague in the other way. Yeah.
Can you use rule sets if you define each profile in a new file?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't show multiple files, but basically what Sushi does is concatenate all the files before it actually runs. So you can do it in Simplifier, you can do it with the command line tool. You can split it out any way that makes sense to you. Yeah, like maybe all the profiles here, examples here, terminology here. Yeah. Nice. 1 minute left. Anyone? Slicing, yeah. We're going to do slicing in the last seconds. Yeah. Oh, good. We can stare at this for a minute. No, slicing, the general concept of slicing means, and we actually did it for the extensions. You have a long array of things. Something is repeatable, like in this case, the identifier. It's repeatable. And all I want to do is say, okay, well, you can give me many identifiers, but I want to say something about this particular subset of identifiers. And in this case, I'm going to say, you need to tell the validator, okay, I get here a bunch of validators in this instance. How do I put them apart? Like, do I need to validate them against this bucket or against this bucket? And so you're telling the validator here, okay, I want you to differentiate the identifiers that come in based on the value of their system. So an identifier is also a codable concept. So maybe the one is BSN, the Dutch citizen identifier. Maybe the other one is a tulip bulb identifier in this case. So you say, okay, I set up the slicing here, and the slicing is open. So you're also allowed to have identifiers that don't fit in any of these buckets. And then finally, you actually need to define the slice. So this is setting up the slicing. And here you define the slices. So you say, okay, identifier contains a bulb ID. And the bulb ID, you can only have one, and you need to have one. And the bulb ID, if you tell the validator, you need to tell them apart by system, then you need to fix the system in some way, because otherwise how it's going to know that it needs to throw it in this bucket? It can never use it. So you say, okay, this bucket has the system set to my bulb identifier here. So whenever you encounter any identifier in here, validator, with the system of bulb identifier, of bulb system, bulb ID system, then validate it against these rules. There needs to be one, can only be one, and it's must support. So if you get 0, it will throw an error here. If you get 2, you throw an error. But if you get any other ones in addition, that's fine. It's an open slicing, you can put more stuff there. Yeah. That's probably more than a minute. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone.
Be sure to fill in the feedback form.